So, the sales numbers for Marathon just dropped, and wow dude, it's actually worse than I thought it was gonna be. Reports are estimating that Marathon sold just around 1.2 million copies across all platforms, and like 70% of those sales are coming straight from Steam. Now, I don't know about you, but those aren't exactly the kind of numbers that scream, we just spent $200 million on this game. And it gets even worse when you look at the actual player counts, because right now the game is barely peaking at around 30,000 concurrent players on Steam. I mean, we all know that extraction shooters are a fairly niche genre to begin with, so why in the absolute hell did Sony and Bungie allegedly dump $200 million into this project? And actually, let's take a step back and ask an even bigger question here. Why did Sony pay nearly $4 billion to acquire Bungie in the first place, just to have their first project pushed out be an extraction shooter? It's just baffling to me, dude. It couldn't be that they're trying to compete with Ark Raiders, could it? Because, yeah, trying to dip your hand in the cookie jar and chase those fading multiplayer trends has worked out so well for Sony lately. How'd that go for Concord again? Oh right, I almost forgot. It got shut down in literally 2 weeks, and $200 million got flushed right down the toilet. And let's not forget about Highguard, another game that chased the hero shooter trend that gamers were screaming that they didn't want anymore. Highguard had some really cool ideas with its medieval setting and modern weapons, but because it was forced into a live service box instead of having like, you know, a traditional single player component, that game ended up losing like 99% of its player base in a week, and then it got yanked offline. Now you would think that the executives over at PlayStation would have learned their lesson by now, but I guess when you're sitting in a boardroom counting other people's money, you just keep making the same surprised Pikachu face every time gamers reject your live service nonsense. Like, seriously, these guys are the very definition of being disconnected from actual gamers. They took a developer who is known for amazingly handcrafted stories, characters, and worlds, a la Halo, and put them to work on an extraction shooter with an overly inflated budget. And if you think all of this senseless marketing wasn't expensive, yeah, think again. These dudes were making literal movies in their trailers, and they were pranking people like they were trying to make the video game sequel The Jackass. And the biggest red flag for Marathon right now is that the console player base just isn't showing up for this game like they should. With nearly 70% of the game sales coming from PC, that means PlayStation and Xbox are making up less than 20% each. For a game that is supposed to be Sony's flagship live service title, the fact that PlayStation gamers are basically ignoring it is pretty hilarious to me. But it also highlights this really weird backward strategy that Sony is currently pushing, because on one hand, they're desperately trying to force their live service multiplayer games onto PC to chase those massive Steam numbers, but on the other hand, they're actually pulling away from porting their single player masterpieces to PC. Like, seriously, I was just reading this article from IGN, are saying that under Sony's current leadership, the PC market has become less important for their traditional single-player exclusives. They're basically backing away from putting their big narrative blockbusters on PC because game sales on the PS5 are at that level where they feel they can sustain themselves without relying on Steam. They did the math, and they just don't care about losing PC gamers as customers for their premium single-player titles. Now, I think this is a completely dumb decision because I personally love playing their games on PC. I'm one of those guys who invested in a good rig because I one day aspire to have a bikini character mod in every game I play. And it sucks that it won't be a reality for Sony's Wolverine game anytime soon. Oh, well, I guess Marvel Rivals is close enough, but hey, they're focusing on their brand and trying to push hardware sales. I get it, but the sheer irony of Sony holding back the single-player masterpieces that gamers actually want to play, while simultaneously force-feeding us their trend-chasing live service garbage like Marathon and that bubblegum Fortnite-looking Horizon game across every platform possible. It's just sad, dude. Like, why does PC get the scraps and the slop, but the actual good games are kept locked up in the PlayStation vault? I mean, if they're trying to get me to boycott all their games on PC, it's definitely working, because look at Marathon. The game just just hasn't found the console crowd at all. And it just goes to show how little Sony is actually thinking about their trend chasing. They honestly think, oh, we can just push out a live service game, slap a recognized studio's name on it, and hit the jackpot. But that's not how the gaming industry works anymore. Gamers are tired. We're exhausted by these games that treat our free time like a second job. You have to actually put out something people want to play, and you do that by appealing to both a hardcore and casual crowd of gamers. Just look at Ark Raiders. Ark Raiders is basically the golden child of the extraction shooter genre right now, because Embark Studios actually understood the assignment. Ark Raiders is more than just a sweat fest of looting and dying to some random tryhard hiding in a bush. Ark Raiders is damn near its own social app at this point. Players aren't just logging in to shoot each other on site, they want to work together. They want to socialize and chill with their friends in a cool sci-fi setting. And when you actually do get into combat, Ark Raiders has so many huge and awesome robots roaming around the map. I mean, you get these little roly-poly ones all the way up to the massive behemoths, and when you and a bunch of other players team up to fight them, it creates these massive blockbuster cinematic moments. It's thrilling, it's cooperative, and it doesn't make you want to rip your hair out. It actually makes you feel like you're part of a living, breathing world instead of a generic multiplayer map. I can't say the same for Marathon. Marathon is just incredibly sterile, overly competitive, and an absolute sweatfest where everyone is just out for themselves. Sure, a lot of people do like Marathon, and I'm not saying the game is completely devoid of value. Honestly, really, I'm not even saying the game is bad, but it doesn't look like the fan base is anywhere near big enough to sustain a $200 million budget, allegedly. The casuals are getting bored and moving on, and that will probably be the ultimate death knell for Marathon moving into the future months. Without the casual players to populate the servers and buy the microtransactions, this game is just gonna cannibalize itself. And let's be real here, the game won't last anywhere near as long as Destiny 2 did. Destiny 2 had its problems, and Bungie definitely milked that dead cow until there was nothing but dust and bones. But at least Destiny 2 had massive game-changing expansions. It had a cooperative strike system, intricate raids, competitive multiplayer modes for people who actually wanted to smack down some noobs online, and a story that kept people coming back, even if the lore was confusing as hell half the time. Marathon doesn't have any of that. The content updates for this game are definitely not going to be as significant because you can only do so much with an extraction shooter before it feels like the exact same repetitive loop with a slightly different coat of paint. I mean, what are they realistically going to do here? Add a new map? Add a new gun that shoots 5% faster? Maybe they'll actually add some interesting enemies to fight against. The casuals are going to completely abandon ship the second a new game drops, and Marathon is going to be left with nothing but the most hardcore, sweaty tryhards who haven't seen the sun in 3 weeks. It just feels like we're watching the slow, agonizing death of AAA gaming in real time. Studios are getting laid off left and right. Legendary developers are being forced to work on microtransaction slop, and publishers are setting mountains of cash on fire to chase trends that died 2 years ago. And the worst part is, they see the success of indie games or AA games that cost a fraction of their budget, and they learn absolutely nothing from it. I mean, Slay the Spire 2 is still pulling in hundreds of thousands of players, and games like Clear Obscure Expedition 33 prove that you can make a visually stunning, award-winning game on a $10 million budget without trying to reinvent the live service wheel. I was actually playing Expedition 33 the other day, and it reminded me of when I would actually get excited of playing games. Like, this was the PS2, PS3 era all over again. It just felt so refreshing to play something that was completely focused on the story and characters while presenting something new and interesting while, you know, not sending me on 100,000 fetch quests or trying to get me to grind thousands of materials unless I bought like a time saver for $2. It takes risks, and it actually has provocative subject matter instead of playing it safe to please some disconnected investors. But no, Sony would rather throw $4 billion at Bungie to give us an extraction shooter that peaks at 30,000 players on Steam. It's like these executives are living in an alternate reality. They're so obsessed with player retention and recurring revenue that they've completely forgotten forgotten just how to have fun and make a complete video game. And that's exactly why I keep retreating back to my single player games, or heck, even my Korean dating simulators, because at least those games give me what I'm asking for. But seriously, the only time I ever felt genuine excitement for a new game is when it doesn't have an always online requirement attached to it. Give me Resident Evil Requiem, give me a handcrafted story with actual pacing and characters that I care about. Let me pause the game to go take out the trash. And yeah, I'm still Leon's #1 hater. I'm more of a Chris Redfield kind of guy myself, but I'll take a million games starring Leon over another extraction shooter any day of the week. Because at the end of the day, gamers are speaking with their wallets. The abysmal sales of Marathon and the complete disaster of Concord are proof that we don't want these. We don't want every single franchise turned into a live service grind, but until the suits in the boardrooms actually start listening to the people buying their products, we're just gonna keep seeing those multi-million-dollar failures stacking up in the graveyard. Anyway, I'm gonna go boot up my computer and play some games that actually respect my time. You know, the ones that cater to my every degenerate desire. It make me feel better about living in my mom's basement. So yeah, this is RageWatch, and if you've made it this far, then maybe consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.
I will not leave without you, Beer.